Welcome to Unseen Destinations. We're diving deep into North Korea today, a place shrouded in mystery, often misunderstood.
You're telling me. We're going way beyond those typical headlines, to explore everyday life in the DPRK. And we've got a fascinating mix of sources here to paint a clearer picture.
Lay it on me.
All right, so we've got this video blogger's travelogue.
Right.
He actually went there.
Wow.
And we also have this Q&A. He answers viewer questions about his trip, and then some insightful articles about North Korean laws.
Interesting.
What it's actually like to live there.
Okay, so we're really trying to get a feel for what it's like to be there from these different perspectives.
A multifaceted perspective, because it's so easy to just rely on those sound bites you see, on the news and stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going to go deeper.
One thing that kind of struck me right off the bat was the sense of control.
Yes.
Like everything felt very controlled, but then at the same time, there were these glimpses of things that felt surprisingly normal.
Right.
It was just such a contradiction.
It's a land of contrasts. Absolutely. Like take Pyongyang, for instance. The blogger describes these immaculate streets, grand monuments, but then you hear about the strict social controls, the overwhelming reverence for the Kim dynasty.
Yeah, and he even talks about how the cityscape dims drastically at night to conserve energy.
Conserve energy.
Makes you wonder, what else is going on beneath the surface,
Absolutely. And it's not just about appearances either. He describes well-stocked department stores, but then mentions food shortages and how central potatoes are to the North Korean diet.
Really?
Yeah. So it really makes you question what's being presented for tourists versus the reality for most citizens.
That's a good point. And that point really hit home when I read the account of the North Korean defector.
Right.
Her experience with scarcity and hardship just paints such a different picture, from the kind of polished image of Pyongyang that we get from the blogger.
A totally different perspective.
Yeah, so let's dive into some of the everyday moments that the blogger captured. He was fascinated by the Pyongyang metro.
Oh, yeah.
He even claims it's the deepest in the world.
Wow.
And he compares it to like Moscow and London.
Those iconic subway systems.
Yeah. With these elaborate mosaics and this distinct Soviet-era aesthetic.
He even got to ride in train cars originally from East Germany.
Really?
Yeah. It's amazing how these historical connections just weave their way into North Korean society.
It's interesting. But even something as universal as basketball isn't immune to the Kim dynasty's influence.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
He explains how Kim Jong-il actually personally changed the rules, awarding extra points for slam dunks.
What?
And shots that don't touch the rim.
Wow.
I mean, talk about a power trip.
Right? It really highlights the extent of control exerted over even leisure activities.
And this is where things get a little unsettling for me. He talks about encountering the Joy Group.
Yes.
And these intense emotional displays surrounding anything related to the Kim family.
Yeah.
It's hard not to question the authenticity of those reactions.
Right. It feels almost choreographed.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the government's tight control over information and media, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, and speaking of control, the 3-generation sentence really stuck with me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
This law, where punishment for a crime extends to 3 generations of your family.
I know, it's unbelievable.
It's almost unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
A chilling example of how fear and the suppression of dissent are used to maintain social control.
The blogger kind of paints this picture of a modern technologically advanced society. But then you read about the limited internet access.
Right.
And most North Koreans only have access to a heavily censored intranet.
Yeah. It's like living in a completely different reality.
A completely different reality.
Yeah.
And that reality is meticulously crafted to maintain the narrative the government wants its citizens to believe.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about the North Korean defector. Her story is so powerful. Escaping to South Korea is incredibly risky and expensive. She had to pay a coyote a fortune to help her cross the border.
Yeah. And those fees have actually doubled since she escaped.
Wow.
They now cost around $30,000.
That's insane.
That speaks volumes about the desperation people feel to leave.
Yeah, she talks about feeling like she had no future there.
Yeah.
And arriving in South Korea was a massive culture shock for her.
Of course. Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear her describe her initial perceptions of South Korea.
Right.
A place she had been taught was a dangerous enemy.
Right.
Yeah.
Brainwashed, basically, to think a certain way.
There's this really poignant moment where she talks about her guide's fascination with South Korean beauty products.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, I had heard about this in North Korea, but I had no idea about things like Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
There's like this tiny window into a world
Right.
that's completely inaccessible to most North Koreans.
It humanizes the situation.
Yeah.
It shows that even in such a closed-off society, people yearn for connection and things beyond their immediate reality.
And you can't talk about North Korea without mentioning the Ryugyong Hotel.
The Ryugyong Hotel.
This thing is massive, 105 floors, supposed to hold over 3,000 rooms.
It's huge.
And it's been unfinished for decades.
I know. It's a symbol of North Korea's ambitions, but also its struggles. Construction began in the 1980s, but then it stalled because of the Soviet Union's collapse and then the famine. Imagine pouring a huge chunk of your country's GDP into a project like that while your people are struggling to survive.
Yeah, it was intended to be the symbol of national pride.
Yeah.
But instead, it became known as the Ghost Hotel.
Right.
This empty shell looming over Pyongyang.
Yeah, and eventually they just turned it into a giant LED screen
Oh, wow.
displaying propaganda.
Really?
It's a pretty stark visual.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the choices a government makes
It does.
and what those choices say about their priorities.
Exactly. Their priorities.
I'm already feeling completely absorbed by this deep dive. It's challenged so many of my preconceptions about North Korea.
It's crucial to remember that when dealing with a place like North Korea, critical thinking is key.
Yes.
The information we're encountering, especially from the blogger, raises questions about the narratives being presented.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. With each layer, we discover something new and unexpected.
Exactly.
So as we continue to explore, consider this. How do we reconcile those glimpses of daily life and personal stories with the broader context of such a tightly controlled society?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
It's a fascinating puzzle.
It is.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to do as we continue our deep dive. Stay tuned.
It's a puzzle, all right.
Hmm.
And one of the pieces we can't ignore is the North Korean legal system.
Oh, yeah.
It's so different from what we're used to, in the West, with laws that are, well, frankly, bizarre.
Give me an example. What do you mean?
Okay, so we're not just talking about minor offenses here. Apparently, even falling asleep at the wrong time can land you in some serious hot water.
No way.
The blogger mentions a defense minister,
A defense minister?
reportedly executed for dozing off during a military rally.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Wow. That's intense.
it is.
It really underscores how even high-ranking officials
Right.
are subject to the regime's unpredictable whims.
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
you never know what's going to set them off.
And then there's this whole thing about bicycles.
Oh, yeah, the bicycles.
They were banned in Pyongyang at one point.
They were, because they wanted people to use motorized vehicles instead.
I guess that makes sense on the surface.
Yeah, on the surface.
Okay.
But as we know, the economy tanked in the early 90s, and most people couldn't even afford food, let alone a car. So naturally, they lifted the ban.
Okay, so they lifted the ban. Everyone's back to cycling.
Mhm.
What's the issue?
Well, a few years later, they decided to ban women from riding bicycles altogether.
Why would they do that?
The stated reason was that it was too suggestive
Too suggestive.
and would damage public morality.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's astonishing how deeply control seems to permeate their society. We've talked about restrictions on information
Yeah.
and even leisure activities.
Right.
But this is something else entirely.
It's a whole other level.
Yeah.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, no.
Remember those articles about everyday life in North Korea?
Yeah.
Well, they get into some other interesting and often perplexing restrictions, like jeans, for example.
Oh, yeah, jeans. Banned as a symbol of Western influence.
Right.
I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
what's so threatening about denim?
I don't know. Apparently anything that hints at Western culture is seen as a potential threat to the regime's ideology.
It's so interesting.
And speaking of things that might raise eyebrows,
Let's hear it.
hairstyles.
Hairstyles, really.
They actually have a guide
Oh,
that outlines acceptable haircuts for men and women.
that's incredible. What happens if you decide to go for a more, shall we say, adventurous look?
Well, let's just say it's not encouraged. And get this. If you're over 60,
Over 60.
you're allowed to let your hair grow a whopping 8 centimeters long.
Wow. What a privilege. I can't believe it. But seriously, it's a stark reminder of how individual expression is stifled in North Korea.
It really is.
And here's one that's almost comical. No one is allowed to have the same name as Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Nope.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, you can't have two supreme leaders running around.
Right, exactly. It really speaks to his ego and his need to be seen as utterly unique and all-powerful. And get this, even his daughter's name.
His daughter's name, too.
Kim Ju-ae is now off limits.
You've got to be kidding me.
Imagine having to change your name
Oh, my God.
because the supreme leader decided it was too special for anyone else.
That's wild.
Yeah,
It's mind-boggling. It's like they're operating on a completely different set of rules.
they are.
And it's not just names. Technology is also heavily controlled.
Yes, very much so.
They have phones.
But
They do have phones,
Mhm.
but international calls are blocked.
what? Everything is monitored. And making an unauthorized call can have dire consequences. We're talking potential death penalty level.
That's scary. So it sounds incredibly oppressive.
Yeah,
Is it all about preventing people from accessing outside information?
absolutely. They're terrified of anything that might challenge their narrative or expose their citizens to alternative viewpoints. That's why foreign media is strictly banned as well. No Hollywood movies, no Western music, not even books.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a level of censorship that's hard to fathom. It's like they're trying to create a hermetically sealed bubble,
They are?
and it goes beyond media. It extends to brands, too. Anything American, especially, is viewed as a symbol of capitalism and therefore a threat.
Oh, yeah.
It's ironic considering reports suggest that the elite in Pyongyang
Right.
have access to all sorts of luxury Western brands.
It seems so
It
weird.
seems like the rules don't apply equally to everyone.
It does seem that way. Yeah.
Speaking of rules, this one's particularly disturbing. If there's a fire, you're supposed to save the portraits of the Kim leaders before saving yourself or your family members.
Oh, my God.
I'm not kidding.
That's just, I don't even know what to say. It's so dehumanizing.
It really is.
It's awful.
It's a chilling illustration of how ingrained this cult of personality is.
It is.
The leaders are placed above everything else, even human life.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking. And what about those who dare to break these rules? What are the consequences?
Well, they have labor camps.
Oh, gosh.
With horrific conditions. And then there's the 3-generation sentence.
Right, where entire families can be punished for the actions of one individual.
Exactly.
It's all about ensuring compliance through fear and intimidation.
It's a system designed to crush any form of dissent. And it seems to extend to even the most intimate aspects of life.
Like what?
The blogger mentioned that triplets are considered
Trusty.
good luck in North Korea.
Okay.
But get this. When triplets are born,
What?
they're taken from their parents
No.
and raised by the state.
Are you serious? That's just cruel.
It is.
It's hard to believe that a government can have so much control over people's lives.
And believe it or not,
There's more.
there's more. They even have their own calendar.
What?
It starts with the birth of Kim Il-sung in 1912.
A whole separate calendar. That's wild.
It's called the Yushae calendar. It's another way of further isolating North Korea from the rest of the world. It's not just physical borders, it's a completely different way of measuring time.
Oh my goodness. It's like they've created this alternate reality
Yeah.
where everything revolves around the Kim family and their ideology.
Exactly.
Wow.
And they've managed to maintain their grip on power for decades, despite immense challenges and international pressure. We've only just scratched the surface here.
I'm eager to hear more. What else have you uncovered about this fascinating and deeply unsettling place? It's incredible how they go to such lengths to control information. Most North Koreans don't even have access to the internet as we know it.
Right. They have this internal network called Kwangyang, which is basically an internet. It's heavily censored, and the content is carefully chosen to reinforce the government's narrative.
It's like living in a digital echo chamber where you only hear what the government wants you to hear.
Exactly. And it's not just the internet. Their TV options are incredibly limited, too.
How limited are we talking?
They have just 4 state-run channels that mainly broadcast propaganda and programs that glorify the regime.
Wow. So it's a constant stream of information designed to shape people's perceptions and prevent them from being exposed to different viewpoints.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole job situation.
Okay. What about jobs?
You don't get to choose your career path in North Korea. The government decides what you'll do for a living.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's all about controlling the workforce and making sure that people are slotted into the roles where the government needs them the most.
So it's not about what you're good at or what you want to do. It's about what the government needs.
Exactly. The defector mentioned how thousands of graduates were sent to a specific region to become potato farmers simply because the government needed more people to work in that sector.
Oh, wow. So there's no room for individual dreams or career aspirations. It's all about serving the state.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And religion. Well, North Korea is officially an atheist state.
They don't allow religion.
They see it as a threat to their authority, a competing ideology that could potentially weaken their grip on power.
Wow.
The blogger mentioned that possessing a Bible can get you into some serious trouble.
Really?
He even talked about a case where an American tourist was imprisoned for leaving his Bible in a restaurant restroom.
It's hard to believe that something like that could happen. Freedom of religion is a basic human right in so many parts of the world. But in North Korea, it simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a completely different reality.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's made me question a lot of my assumptions and face the harsh realities of a place that's often shrouded in mystery.
It just goes to show how important it is to engage with different sources of information and to really think critically about the stories we're being told. Only then can we begin to understand the complexities of a place like North Korea.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that behind the headlines, behind these laws and restrictions, there are real people trying to live their lives, facing challenges and finding ways to cope.
The defector story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She risked everything to escape to a new life, knowing that she might never see her family again.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the most oppressive of circumstances, hope can still exist, and the desire for freedom can burn brightly.
So as we conclude our journey into North Korea, it's important to keep asking those tough questions, to challenge the easy answers, and to never lose sight of the human element at the heart of this story.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive, full of unexpected twists and turns. It's a reminder that the world is full of unseen destinations, each with its own unique story waiting to be explored and understood. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Unseen Destinations.